Why should us Detroit Lions fans be hopeful about this upcoming season? I mean, we just finished 3-12-1, and nobody seems to be that enthused about the players we brought in. Well, I'm here to tell you why you should have at least a little bit of hope. I'm going to get into some player comparisons later in the video to try to show where we upgraded, at least try to prove that we upgraded, but that's not the biggest reason I think you should have hope. I want to talk about this from a Lions YouTuber perspective first. Here's what I've learned so far about doing this YouTube thing. You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. How does that Dark Knight quote relate to being a Lions YouTuber? Or just a Detroit sports YouTuber? Well, let me put it this way. I'm either going to die because I'm trying to be optimistic about this team, or I'm gonna be a villain for being wrong. So from my perspective, I have nothing to lose. It's only a matter of time before my channel becomes villainized. So I might as well try to be a hero, and then I'll inevitably become a villain whenever that time comes. If I'm negative about the team, I'm just going to be called a hater for it. And if I'm positive about the team, I'm going to be called delusional, and if I'm wrong, all the negative fans are going to come rub it right in my face and shove it right down my throat about how wrong I was. So, essentially, I have nothing to lose by trying to have hope. And you don't have anything to lose by having hope for this team either. Everyone wants to say that, oh, Matt Patricia's horrible. He's a defensive specialist that doesn't know how to coach defense. Trade Stafford, get new ownership, fire Bob Quinn. Everyone has their different explanations for why the Lions have been such a doormat franchise. Well, I have a different theory. My theory is that we never have hope. We enter every season expecting to lose. It's almost like we enter every season wanting to lose. With some of these fans, I even wonder if they're actually rooting for their team to win or not. There's a dark cloud of negativity surrounding this franchise. It's like we speak it into failure. Like the Cardinals game is a perfect example. There was no way we should have tied that game. I feel like the negativity won out. We all felt there was no way we could lose. But then all the negative fans were saying, we're going to lose. And they just kept repeating it. We're going to lose. We're going to lose. We're going to lose. We're going to lose. It was a tie, but it felt like a loss. Now, is my theory a bit far-fetched? Yes, it is. But whether it's the number one thing holding the franchise down or not, I believe it is absolutely part of the reason that this franchise hasn't won a playoff game since 1991. So for a quick recap, before I give you reasons to have hope. Wherever this channel takes me, it is going to be villainized eventually. It's only a matter of time. So I might as well try to be a hero before I inevitably become a villain. Now, I just had my mini rant. Now, I want to be clear though. I'm not telling you to go bet your whole paycheck on the Lions making the playoffs or winning the Super Bowl. And I'm not telling you that you should get drunk on that Honolulu Blue Kool-Aid. That's not at all what I'm telling you. I'm just saying it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of hope. Also, I'm not saying that you shouldn't criticize your team ever. I'm just saying there needs to be balance. You need to find a balance between being critical and a balance between being optimistic. Like I said about the Honolulu Blue Kool-Aid, you don't need to be getting drunk on it and going like, oh, the Lions are about to go 16-0 and become the first 19-0 team in NFL history. But you don't need to be on the other end saying that the Lions are about to go 0-16 or 2-14 or 3-13 either. It's about balance. So the first reason that you should have hope for this upcoming season is that we are going to get Matthew Stafford back. Now the question is, how bad is his back injury? Is he going to injure it again? Well, back injuries aren't always pretty. In all honesty, this injury just might affect Stafford for the rest of his career. But getting Matthew Stafford back is certainly a ginormous plus. Now, I am fully aware that not every Lions fan feels that way. Well, you know what? Here's what I think of Stafford. I think he's one of the best players to ever put on a Lions uniform. Now, I know the counter argument to that is, well, that's not saying much. He's on the Lions. And my retort to that is, what do you mean it's not saying much? The Lions have had lots of good players in their history. I don't know if y'all are aware of this, but 4 Lions made it onto the NFL all-time team. Barry Sanders, Joe Schmidt, Jack Christensen, and Night Train Lane. Now, Lane came over to the Lions when he was probably past his prime, but my point is, we've had good players. Dick LeBeau, Lem Barney, Alex Karras, Lou Creekmer, Calvin Johnson, Herman Moore, Lomas Brown, Kevin Glover, Bobby Lane, Doak Walker, Harley Sewell, Dick Stanfel, Darius Slay, Glover Quinn, Cloyce Box. The Lions have had good players in their history. They haven't had good teams, but they've had good players. So sitting up there and saying, oh, Matthew Stafford being a top 10 Lion of all time isn't saying much. No, this franchise has had lots of good players. No matter what you think of Stafford, though, the bottom line is it is great to be getting him back. And hopefully he can stay healthy for the full season. We got a chance in every single game when he is on the field. Whether we're down by 21 or heck, down by 35 when we almost pulled the greatest comeback off in NFL history. We got a chance just because he is on the field. Stafford ain't the only player we're going to be getting back. We're going to be getting back Kerryon Johnson. Now, there's of course lots of question marks surrounding Kerryon Johnson. But you know what? There have been players that were injury riddled their first couple seasons and then pulled it together as their careers went on, namely Stafford. Also, Dalvin Cook is not a bad example of that either. Now, Kerryon was not having particularly the greatest of seasons when he was healthy. Hopefully, Darrell Bevell can go in, figure out what went wrong with the run game, and go from there. Maybe build the run game around Kerryon's skill set a little better. Also, Kerryon Johnson's last 2 games are certainly worth talking about real fast. He had kind of a rough start to the season, with the exception of the Kansas City game. But then, against Denver, 10 carries for 42 yards. Not bad. And then against Green Bay, 11 carries for 53 yards and 1 touchdown. Not bad at all. I think he was starting to get into a little bit of a groove. And then there's another guy that I don't think we've been talking about enough. Deshaun Hand. Now, he has also been injured the last couple of seasons. He ended 2018 on IR, and he only appeared in 3 games in 2019. Now, these aren't my words. These are Damon Harrison's words. Deshaun Hand is going to be a top 3 defensive lineman in the NFL. Now, is Snacks right? I don't know, but that's a pretty big compliment to the abilities of Deshaun Hand. So with these 2 guys, can they stay healthy? And can they continue to develop? And can they continue to progress? I think they'll both continue to progress, but I guess the bigger question is, can they stay healthy? Well, we'll see, but they are great talents when they are on the field. We're getting both of these guys back. So let's talk about some player comparisons now. Desmond Trufant versus Darius Slay. From a pure statistical standpoint, this is probably a downgrade, but it is on a cheaper contract. And honestly, where I have the allowed completion percentages for both of these players, I'm not 100% sure that that is correct. Every single one of these stats is off of Pro Football Reference. And when it gets to the targeted stats, I'm not 100% sure they're correct, if I gotta be honest. But it's what Pro Football Reference gave me, so it's what I'm gonna use. But from a pure statistical standpoint, this is probably a downgrade. However, here is why I'm going to tell you this is an upgrade. Darius Slay was not buying in. Whether you want to put that on Matt Patricia, or whether you want to call Darius Slay a pussy, it's irrelevant. The bottom line is that Darius Slay was not buying in. And all it takes is for one player to destroy a locker room. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying Darius Slay or Matt Patricia are in the right or in the wrong. The bottom line is that Matt Patricia, it looks like he finally got all the people out that weren't buying in. And he needs everybody to buy in. All it takes is for one player to not buy in for it to just derail the season. So, as far as I know, Patricia got everybody out that was not buying in. So let's talk about probably one of the most controversial moves of the offseason. Cutting Devin Kennard. Well, if we compare him to Jamie Collins pretty much owns Devin Kennard in just about every category. If something is underlined, then that means that that player, one, in that particular category. Devin Kennard had 2 fumble recoveries versus Jamie Collins' 1 fumble recovery. So I underlined the 2 fumble recoveries for Devin Kennard. You all see the underlines, I'm sure. Jamie Collins is a better linebacker than Devin Kennard, at least from a pure production standpoint. Now, I don't want to make it sound like I didn't like Kennard as a player, because in all honesty, I wish we could have kept Collins and kept Kennard. But Collins, from top to bottom, is a more productive player. They both had 7 sacks in 2019. But when you look a little closer, Collins had 6 games with a sack, while Kennard had 5 games with a sack. Jamie Collins had 1 more tackle for loss than Kennard did. But again, Collins had 8 games with a tackle for loss, while Kennard only had 6 games with a tackle for loss. I don't want to make it sound like I don't like Kennard as a player, because I did like Kennard as a player. But Collins is an upgrade over Kennard. I don't love that we cut him, but we upgraded our linebacking core. I honestly don't understand the dislike for the Jamie Collins signing. But then again, I am fully aware that there's people that don't understand how I could like it. There's the production, and that's why I think we upgraded at the linebacker position. So now I get to talk about Duron Harmon versus the player that I believe he is upgrading, Will Harris. From a pure statistical standpoint, Harmon is an upgrade over Harris, unless Harris makes drastic improvements this upcoming season. Harris actually did have more tackles than Harmon did in less defensive snaps, but Harris gave up a higher completion percentage and more touchdowns in less defensive snaps as well, at least according to Pro Football Reference. And like I mentioned on the Trufant versus Slay slide, I'm not 100% sure that these stats are right because other places list different things. But again, it's what I have, so it's what I'm going to use. Harmon had 2 interceptions compared to Harris's 0, 5 passes defended compared to Harris's 3. Now, Harris does win the tackling category. Both of these players had 1 tackle for loss. Harmon did take more defensive snaps than Harris did, but I struggle to look at this and not believe that Harmon does not upgrade this secondary in some way, shape, or form. And again, he did take more defensive snaps than Harris did. But I don't know. I struggle to look at what Harmon brings to the table and not believe that the secondary did not get better. Now, the last player comparisons I'm going to do are our old defensive tackles in Damon Harrison and Mike Daniels versus Danny Shelton and Nick Williams. I combined both of their production on this slide. In 24 games, Harrison and Daniels had 59 combined tackles. Shelton and Williams in 32 games had 103 combined tackles. 35 solo tackles for Harrison and Daniels versus 54 solo tackles for Shelton and Williams. 5 tackles for loss for Harrison and Daniels versus 7 tackles for loss between Shelton and Williams. 3 combined sacks between Harrison and Daniels versus 9 combined sacks for Shelton and Williams. Now, the games are not even. However, even if I adjust on a per-game basis, Shelton and Williams averaged more combined tackles, solo tackles, assists on tackles, tackles for loss by a mini margin, and they more than doubled the sack production of Harrison and Daniels on a per-game basis. Our defensive line got at least a little better. I mean, you can say that they might not be able to learn the system fast enough with the time that they're about to have or whatever. But man, we did not do that bad in free agency. We did pretty okay, all things considered. From a pure statistical standpoint, pretty much everything is an upgrade. How big of an upgrade these signings are is almost irrelevant. The difference between being bottom 10 and top 10 in yards allowed is not that big. The team that ranked 23rd in yards allowed 374.5 yards per game. The team that ranked 10th in the NFL in yards allowed gave up 331.7 yards per game. That's not that many yards. Every percentage point counts. Did Shelton and Williams give us that 5 to 6% improvement? Time will tell. But for now, I'm happy with having these guys on the team. Williams is interesting because his production kind of faded in the second half of 2018, and he's only been productive for 1 year. But like I said, Shelton and Williams had better production in 2019 than Harrison and Daniels did. Hopefully I gave you fans a little bit of hope. And I want to repeat again, I'm not making this video to say that you should bet your paycheck on the Lions winning the Super Bowl or making the playoffs. I'm more just saying, inspire your team. You root for them. You pay for their merch. So you might as well inspire them at least a little bit. I think you'd all be surprised at how much of a difference even the smallest amount of inspiration can make. Now, of course, I remember being on the opposite side of this where all we were doing in the DSA was inspiring the Lions. And it didn't work. But that all goes back to the fact that we still had so many negative fans that just seemed like they wanted the Lions to lose. Now, on the screen, I have the question marks entering the season. I'll address that in a different video. So, are you allowed to criticize your team? Of course you're allowed to criticize your team. You should be critical of your team. But, there has to be a balance between being overly critical and giving constructive criticism. And it just feels like, as Lions fans, we just want something to bitch about. We want to find every little thing humanly possible about this team for us to bitch about. Who knows? Maybe I'm tripping, but whatever. When I get to these question marks, whenever I do, I will be a little more critical than I'm being in this video. In particular, I'm going to be critical of Matt Patricia. So let's at least try to have a good attitude. At least until we get through 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 games. If we start 0-8, then I'll lose all hope. But right now, every team has 0 wins and they also have 0 losses. So we should just enter with a good attitude and hopefully it will help the team out. And if it doesn't, oh well, there's always next season, as we say. But yeah, that will be all for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed.